Like 'em or hate 'em, toy cameras were a big part of the 35mm film market. And today we're going to talk about a camera that is kind of a toy camera, but has maybe a little more features and is honestly one of the most produced film cameras ever, and that is the Lomo Smena 8M. So the Smena 8M is in the line of the Smena cameras that Lomo created through, a while in the Soviet Union. The 8M itself was created from 1970 through 1995. So crazy production run on some of these cameras in the Soviet Union because, again, I think they found something that worked and then they just stuck with it and drove it into the ground basically until it wasn't really applicable anymore. So we're looking today at the Smena 8M. First of all, I got this from Goodwill online, and I was surprised to see that it came in a case. I thought that was kind of cool. So it has kind of like this plasticky thing in front of the lens, and then throughout the rest of it, it's what I believe to be like actual genuine leather. So kind of nice for what is ultimately, again, kind of a toy camera. We open it. It's a little bit of a tight fit, but here we are. This is the Smena 8M. We'll take a closer look at it, but like on first blush here, this camera is not sophisticated. This is, and why I'm calling it kind of a toy camera. And I think calling it a toy camera is maybe a little bit of a disservice because I think this has, compared to say like the Diana camera or the Holga camera or whatever, like I think this has just that little bit more that this would have been like an average consumer camera. You think about when you used to go to CVS and get like those like Kodak or Fuji film cameras, the disposables, right? Like those were point and shoot and they were, sort of one and done. Something like this, on the other hand, is like a step up from that we're able to reuse it. We're able to load multiple different types of film into it, but then also we have shutter control, we have aperture control, we have a flash sync. Like there's plenty of other stuff on here that I think makes it just that little bit better. So let's take a look at it. But first I also want to take 1 second to say thank you guys for 200 subscribers. It feels like it wasn't that long ago I was thanking you for 100. So I really appreciate the momentum we have going here, and I just want to thank you all again. So let's get into the real video. Okay, and here we go. Here is our Smena 8M. Now, a confession I have before I really jump into this video is that I got this camera and I have not shot it yet. So that is on my list of to-dos here. I feel like I haven't found a good opportunity. And one of the other problems is, while this case is so nice and like actually really sturdy, there's not a great place to put a strap. I assume that that's what this was on this case, and then someone broke it off. So maybe I'll try and thread a strap underneath of here or something. I just need to find a way to like make this case a little more functional with a strap, and then I think this will come out with me more and more. So first thing I think to note for this camera, it is plastic. And when I say plastic, I mean it. Like this camera is through and through plastic. And you know what? There's something to be said for that. Because in all regards, if I take this camera out and I drop it and something breaks on it or whatever, like having a cheap 35mm camera isn't a bad idea. It means that you can have something, have fun, and not have to feel too precious about it. Like if you brought your Leica out and dropped it, that's a real problem. Now, as we look at this camera again, like I said, it's pretty stark overall, not much to speak of, but we'll take a look at it and, hopefully I'll get out to shoot it sometime soon. So on the front here, we have this Lomo T43 40mm f4 lens. So that's kind of good, honestly, for a toy camera. A lot of them I feel like will shoot at f8 or so that they're able to get things in focus all around. But like f4 is really not that bad. And a 40mm gives you maybe just that little bit of extra, sort of zoom out from your standard 50. I feel like 40 is really nice. I tend to shoot 35mm lenses a lot. So 40 is a really good sort of in-between for me. Now this T43 lens is a triplet style lens. And we have here several aperture controls that we can set. So we have, like I said, f4 as our lowest, but then we can go up to 5, 6, 8, 11, and 16. And it is sort of sliding, so technically you could get values in between as well. Now over here there is also a GOST ASA and DIN scale, and this is because this camera itself is made to be like really user-friendly, right? So let's say, just for a second, we're gonna shoot 200 speed film, right? So let's set this red dot to where roughly 200 would be here, just short of 250. Now in doing that, you'll notice that back on the aperture side here, that moved the red dot to about 16, as opposed to where we had it before, where it was shot at f4. You know, that was for ISO 16 film, so definitely really low, which you can get from Lomography. I think I've had ISO 13 film from them before, the Babylon Kino. Cool film, try it. I'll say that, yeah, once we set it to that sort of 200 area, we're ending in between f11 and f16. And you know what? So that's cool. Like that for a very, you know, sort of pedestrian camera here, that you're able to get your aperture value dialed in easy. That's cool. Now, on the top here, also for, again, more the, we'll call it pedestrian value of this camera, we have a couple symbols you'll see here. We have sunny, we have maybe a more diffuse sort of sun, maybe just sort of like hazy. We have partly cloudy, cloudy, and then we have like what's looking like rainy. And so these are our shutter speeds, and we control that with the dial here. You're able to just turn this dial and select whatever speed you want. Is it sunny outside? Is it, you know, partly cloudy, or is it dark? And again, because we've set our aperture value here on the lens, now we're able to sort of go directly with this. So let's say, you know, it's sunny outside, and let's say that we've set our ISO here appropriately, then we would be able to just wind on our shutter and take the shot. Now, before you do that, of course, you want to make sure that you have your focus correct. And before I say anything about this camera for focusing, I want to just stress that I saw online someone saying that you can take these lenses off. I tried that. When I did, I broke it because there is a focus limiter in here. As you can see, it doesn't go past infinity. So do not try and do that, because what you will have to do is completely disassemble like the outer housing of the lens and place it back on. And you know, it's complicated, and this is a toy camera, so just don't break it. So if we go back to the beginning here of our focus, we have 1 meter, and on there you can see just a person, looks kind of like a girl. We come in, and then we have 2 people here as our next symbol. That's between, you know, roughly 1.5 meters. Keep going. We have like 2 girls and a guy. So this is for a crowd shot. That's at 4 meters. Now we're into more of a landscape shot, and this looks like a building with 2 trees next to it. And then of course, infinity. That's actually kind of a handy guide, because the one thing to mention for this camera is this is just a viewfinder camera. This is not, you know, there's no focusing aid, but you can probably get close enough. And honestly, if we're talking how this camera is set right now, if we had one person that is roughly 1 meter from us, and we're shooting this at, what do we say, between f11 and f16, if it's close enough to 1 meter, you're going to be just fine, because that aperture value is going to definitely get them in focus. If we set this to 2 meters, this is saying that at f4, 2.5 and just under 1.5, or just over 1.5 meters will be in focus. But once we look around to f16, like, we're back at, you know, that person from before. So like the camera itself here, at least according to this focus scale, at f16, if you have this thing set to f16, it's basically going to be a point and shoot. Again, of course, assuming that your shutter speed is correct. Now, you might be thinking like, okay, that's all fine and dandy, but what if I want a bit more control than like saying that it's maybe a little cloudy, right? You're in luck. If we flip this camera upside down here, you can see there are actual shutter speed values here. We have 250, 125, 60, 30, 15, and bulb. So if we're saying, you know, that we're doing sunny, and we have this aperture value set for our 200 film. Again, this is set to 250. If we had the Gauss scale set to 250, it'd be 16, 250. So it's literally a sunny 16 is what it's trying to give us right now with that. And that's great. So you can have sort of an automatic sunny 16 built into this camera. But it's cool that you have like the pictures up top that are then correlated with real shutter speeds underneath. So if you're like, okay, I actually want to use this, let's set to, 60, let's set to 5.6, you can do that. And that's where I think that this gets a little bit of a bad reputation as a toy camera, because so many toy cameras are really like one setting, or they have like one thing that you can click between, that it's cloudy and sunny, and that's it. That this has an actual array of shutter speeds, that this has an actual, like, several changeable aperture values. It has symbols on the lens that help make sense, but then also has a focus scale that you're able to say, okay, so if I'm shooting at f8 or something, like if I have my 2 people, but I'm also getting my 1 person distance. So like, I think that's kind of helpful, and I think that gives it just that little bit more than a toy camera. Like, I think this is very much like an everyman's camera rather than calling it a straight up toy camera. So what else do we need to know for this camera here? Let's see. We have, obviously, there's a tripod socket on the bottom. Mine has a serial number on the bottom that is for 1977. That's kind of cool. Of course, now that we have our settings all set, we need to know how to take a picture on this. And it's actually quite easy. Our shutter is here and prominent. What we have to do is just cock this. It's exactly like the cocking mechanism on the Lubitel. If you look at it, like, it's literally that same arm. And I think the Lubitel also has the T43 lens, if I'm not mistaken. So some interesting parallels between this and the Lubitel. Now, if we just press this shutter, that pops up. And it's really that simple. It almost has kind of a comical sound to it. Like, if we listen, it's just like this little clack. So let's set to something slower. Let's set to, if it's a rainy day. And you hear the little buzz in there of the delay mechanism, because that's the 15 second. So let's set to 30. You can hear just that little bit of the delay. 60. Again, pretty quick. 125. Yep. And then finally, again, back to our 250. Again, remarkable how similar some of this is to the Lubitel. Like, this ring looks very similar. The numbers look the same. And again, Lomo made both of them, so it's not terribly surprising that they've just kept to brand. But still, kind of cool. So what else do we want to know for this camera? I guess we can say that on the top here, we have a shoe mount, which there is a flash sync. So again, where I'm going to say, I think this gets a little bit of a bad rep, calling it just a toy camera, because I think it is just a little bit more than that. And now here on the back, we have our viewfinder, which again is not coupled to anything, but you can get rangefinder attachments for these cameras, which is kind of funny because you can just slide it right onto the hot shoe, and then you can select a value in the rangefinder to dial into this. So I think that's kind of cool, because that actually, for if this was your everyman's camera and then they gave you an ability to make it just that little bit more than like something that your dad pulls out at a party, or that like a kid might use, having that rangefinder made it maybe even a little bit more professional, or like, sort of a starter camera. We have a frame counter here. And we have our film wind. So all you have to do is wind that, and then it will stop when it's ready at the frame. Once you fire the shutter, it will allow you to continue winding, and you just keep going through the film roll like that. Once you're done, we have our wind knob here, and we're able to just use it as such. Very easy, and pretty straightforward. So let's pop open the back here and see what the inside of the camera looks like. Again, remarkable to like that this camera actually looks kind of like a camera inside, as opposed to some of the other toy cameras, which I think kind of don't. Like we have here a take-up spool. And, you know, it's not just like feed into the abyss like you have on the disposable cams or anything like that. Like it actually has a lock on it too, so the film spool doesn't want to just fall out all the time. We have, again, here in the center our shutter, so let's cock that and fire that with the door open. So very simple. Let me set this honestly over to bulb real quick so that we can, and this is gonna, there it is. So real simple, the film just goes like in here, runs across. This little gear here is what operates the frame counter. And then, yeah, once you're done, just rewind the film. It's really that simple. And I think that's kind of cool because, like, again, what more do you need? There's really, I mean, the film's got a pressure plate back here, so it's kind of legit in some regards. It, you know, is probably going to catch some hate in the comments for people saying it's a junk camera, but honestly, I am more impressed with it than I am for some other toy cameras. And I think it's important to just keep in mind that it is what it is. Like, this was meant to be, like I said, kind of the everyman camera and something that you could afford on whatever salary that you had in the Soviet Union at the time, which was probably kind of not a lot. So this was sort of a luxury piece to have, but also kind of an everyman's camera. And I think that that's just a cool way to look at it, that this is not going to be like an amazing camera. It's not a Leica, and it would never be. But it is something that people were able to use, and again, is apparently the most created film camera ever, because it was made in such high quantities. Because, again, look how freaking easy this thing would be to produce. Make the plastic, make the lens. Like, it's almost a box camera, but with a little bit more going for it. And I think that's really cool. So I look forward to shooting this. Again, I need to figure out a good solution for my case here, but once I do, I have a feeling this is going to come out with me for a couple shoots, because I just really like the idea of getting to try it. It's funny too, seeing like the shutter release and the tripod on here. Like, you could technically take landscape shots with this if you wanted to. So I'd be curious to try that kind of thing out and see exactly what I get. But I think people talk about this as sort of a lomographic camera. It's not maybe going to give you like the absolute most high quality shots ever. And I think that's a style choice. It's a style that I lean into a lot for a lot of my photography. I like to get stuff that's maybe a little different, a little off the beaten path than just your Canon, Nikon, Leica film cameras. So yeah, that's all we have for the Smena 8M today. I'm really curious to hear in the comments, have you shot this camera? Do you know anything about this camera that I missed? Please share with me. But that's all we have for today, guys. Thank you again for tuning in. We'll see you next time. And thank you again for 200 subscribers. I'm really glad to have you here. If you liked this, feel free to subscribe, and we'll see you next time. Bye.